Hey guys, I just wanted to tee you up real quickly for the video clip I'm about to show you. It's with Dr. Joseph Volpicelli, who is literally the leading expert and researcher and clinician about naltrexone for alcohol use disorder, where he answers the question of why isn't naltrexone more well known? If it's that effective for treating alcohol addiction, how come so many physicians and so many people around the world don't even know about this treatment? I hope that you find this clip helpful. As always, you can learn more about this treatment with my other videos or the link in my profile.
I mean, that's a great question. And that's what I've been spending the last few years, 2 decades, trying to figure out. And what I can tell you is that there's a difference between what people think in the academic community and in actual clinical practice, and that's one of the reasons why I left Penn, because in the academic community, eventually over time, I wore people down. So they began to accept naltrexone was a good effective treatment. And then people are doing studies where they said, and the standard treatment naltrexone, which is hilarious to me because when it first came out, I was a heretic and people didn't believe the results. And now people are doing studies where they said, compared to the standard treatment naltrexone. So we won the battle there in the academic community, but it didn't cross over into the treatment community. And so I asked the question, why is that? And people would say things like, well, don't you know naltrexone has all these terrible side effects, or it's too expensive, or it really only works for a certain percent of people, a small percent of people, or its effects are modest at best. And I said, well, that's not what I find in my research. I don't know. Maybe there's something different in the clinical population. So I said, okay, let me set up a model treatment program. So I set up the Volpicelli Center, and I ran it just like a clinic, but it was based on using evidence-based treatment approaches. What I was doing in research, I just applied in a clinical setting, and I found the results were just as good in clinical practice as they were in the research studies. And so then I said, look, you can do this. And I still find resistance. And now I'm beginning to wonder what's the genesis of that resistance. And sometimes I wonder if the idea that naltrexone could be effective is offensive to certain people's models. And I think we'll get into this in one of the later lectures. And I'll talk about how people, in order to understand the world, they have certain models, they have certain narratives, certain stories about what something is. And they base their decisions based on that narrative. And sometimes it's really hard to get new information into that narrative. They have their own silos, and they listen to just data that's consistent with their silo. They almost actively resist new data. And
Confirmation bias.
yes, exactly. And the idea that naltrexone could be effective is a real challenge to people's models of what they think about addiction. And I'll just give you one example. I'll just give you one little taste. Most of the current definitions of addiction call it a chronic disease, chronic brain disease, chronic disease of character, whatever. It's chronic. It's a forever thing. Naltrexone, and the model that I use in my practice, suggests that you can be free of it. The idea that you don't have to keep going to meetings if you don't want to. You're not tethered to a medicine that your body is physically dependent on. For some people, that's a really dangerous thing to say, because they think if patients in my treatment program were to hear this, they would drop out of treatment and immediately go on and abuse their drugs, abuse the alcohol. You can't get that message out there, or that's going to really interfere with the kind of treatment that we're doing for people. But if it works, and in my experience, it does work, that suggests that their model is wrong. And so if they were to accept naltrexone, they would have to admit their model of thinking about addiction is wrong. So it's hard for people to get to that point. So I've spent decades trying to convince them to integrate the use of naltrexone into their programs. And I've argued that you're going to get better results. I've argued that it's good to keep people in treatment. So you can still do all your good psychosocial stuff. You can still have all your meetings. Just give them naltrexone and they'll stay in treatment longer and they'll get better. None of that has had much of an impact because people think the idea of naltrexone should not work. I don't believe the results. The same thing that I had in the academic community in the early days, I'm finding in the treatment community. Where's the change going to come? I've tried insurance companies. I've tried showing data to clinicians. I've given speeches. I've done all sorts of things. And the best traction I'm getting right now is from people who are suffering from addiction themselves, who are suffering from alcohol problems, and they want an option. They say, I've tried this, I've tried that, and it's a struggle. And even people who have 12 years sober, they'll still come up to me and say, but I'm still white knuckling it. God forbid, I have a wedding coming up and I'm dreading it because there's going to be alcohol around and I'm afraid that it's going to increase my craving and I'm going to slip up. And God forbid, if I have one drink, I'll be back to where I was. And so they're still struggling with it, even though they have years of sobriety. And I say, there's another option where you can be free of that. And that's where I'm getting some traction. And I have to say one other thing, and that is the opioid epidemic may be helping the field of addiction as well. And it's a sort of a subtle cultural thing, but if you look at alcohol but drugs in general, there's a certain sense that people who use the drugs, there's something wrong with them in some way. And, it's sort of good to isolate those folks so that they don't contaminate regular society. But it's really hard to defend that position these days now because the opioid epidemic is affecting children, young adults in the suburbs. And so parents are coming to me and they say, I know my Jimmy is a good kid. He's not, doesn't have any defect in his personality. He's not one of these kids who's a bad kid. It was the damn drug that got him hooked. And so they're looking for something that's going to free up their child so that they don't have to show up to methadone clinic every day. They don't have to be on a opiate agonist for the rest of their life. They want their old Jimmy back. And I say, here's an option for you. And so the sense that they have is that I'm looking for new treatments, I'm looking for new options, and naltrexone has a lot of appeal for them. So the change may come more from the grassroots, from people who are trying to get better and recover, as opposed from the treatment industry.
Thank you for watching, guys. As always, if you want private, personalized, daily support for your Sinclair Method journey, definitely check out the program that we have at Thrive. You can access information by clicking the link below or visit thrivealcoholrecovery.com.